Good afternoon. It's Patricia Dacre, and welcome to the weekly video chat, my video blog. Glad that you could join me. Today, we're going to be talking about your journey to better, right? So what does that mean? What's better? So when I think about how well I do with things, it usually has to do with how I feel. So if I'm not feeling great, even just from a cold or a headache or low energy, I'm not going to do my best. I'm not going to feel like cleaning the house. I won't feel like, starting a new project because I don't feel good. And so those feelings can be physical feelings or emotional feelings. So for me, part of the challenge with really managing diabetes and keeping your head in the game is trying to feel better. So that's what we're going to talk, because it really is a journey to a better place. And for many people, and for myself as well, there was a long time where I was not in a better place. I think it's interesting that the current medical models are all focused on education, right? They're going to tell us information. They will help us to understand our disease process, which is certainly necessary. But when I was diagnosed, I knew all that already, right? I was a nurse. I'd been a nurse for several years. I understood how to give medication. I understood how to do blood sugar checks. I understood the clinical pathology behind the disease. I understood the treatment. I understood it all. I could teach people with diabetes, but I still struggled, right? So education isn't the key. So what I want to talk to you about today are the 5 strategies that I use with my clients. And there are 5 strategies that have helped me get to better so I can manage my diabetes better. So we're gonna, I'll share those with you. The interesting thing too is that I found these by trial and error, right? It was my own journey to find these things. And as I'm putting coursework together and doing some things right now, I'm finding a lot of research that supports what I knew to be true. So it's interesting that in places in the world, this whole idea that it's more than just education that helps you live the best life with diabetes. It's a lot more than that. One of the terms they're using is the psychosocial impact. And that's something I really align with. So when you think of what psychosocial means, psycho is your mental or your emotional part of you, and social is the things like your finance, your relationships, your neighborhood, your school, your work, all those other areas of your life, the things that you do every day. And really, to me, that's where the hardest part is. We can learn the information about a disease, but the hardest part is really doing it day by day. So as we go through, there are 5 pillars or 5 strategies, if you will, and I'm just going to touch briefly on each one. And then if you have any questions, certainly leave some comments, and we'll take it from there. So, I'm a nurse at heart, so number 1 still is education. So I still think it's very important to be informed about your disease, right? There's so much about it, and what I find is that even people who have had the disease for a long time still maybe don't understand exactly what's going on inside them. So there's a certain aspect that we need to be informed, understand the terminology, understand how the disease works, so you're empowered to do your best to minimize any complications and to manage it to your best. So stage 1 is education. I think there's a lot of that already out there, right? That's what your doctor's office. Stage 2 for me was the part that was just so eye-opening, but it was grief, believe it or not, and dealing with my emotions. So when you experience diabetes, you actually experience a loss, and it's very similar to losing a loved one. And you really did. You lost part of your life that you thought it was going to be. There was an expectation that you had about what your life would look like, and diabetes certainly changes how that's going to be. But nobody talks about the emotions. And so as you're going through this, and not just with diagnosis, but even years later, you have feelings of shame and guilt. You feel like that you're failing quite a bit, like you can't do it. You have feelings of overwhelm. You have feelings of anger, of sadness. And when I finally sort of started to understand the emotional side of it, I realized it was grief. So the grieving process goes through, there's 5 basic stages that I'll kind of take you through right now, but there's actually more than that, and there's different models now that have come out, but kind of the old tried and true is the 5 stages of grief. So anger, and that's that that denial and anger when you say, no, this isn't happening, it's not me, it's your refusal to believe. And then once you start to understand that it's not going away, we really get mad. And I think when we get mad, people are not comfortable, right? They try to cheer us up. They try to tell us why we shouldn't be mad. They try to explain things away. And the reality is we have a right to be mad, right? We lost something. We lost something very near and dear to us. So anger is appropriate. It's a very appropriate emotion. You just have to realize why you're having it. I think that's the biggest thing, is to understand you are having these emotions because you're going through a trial and a very tough time and a very long process, right? So it goes on for maybe years and years and years, and anger will happen. It's frustrating. So give yourself some grace to work through that. You should feel anger. We just don't want to stay there all the time, right? As you start to really figure out that this thing's not going away, we do what's called bargaining. And bargaining is kind of the trial and error, back and forth. I'll try this, I won't do that. I'll eat this, I won't eat that. It's this back and forth, trying to make our way, trying to figure it out. And many times this is very frustrating because we fail. I would offer that instead of being frustrated, learn from these painful experiences. So pain has two functions, really. One, it lets us know that something's wrong. So if you break your bone, there's pain, you know about it. If you touch something hot, there's pain, you know about it. If you have emotional pain, there's something wrong, right? Something is not in alignment. It's not where it needs to be. So you can keep dragging that pain around, or you can turn inward and look at that and try to figure out what it's from. What's the root cause? How did I get there? And that's something that takes, more than one session and a lot of soul work and some understanding on your part. But as we work through those things in the bargaining stages, that's really where we want to analyze things, figure out what's going on, take a look, be curious, and understand our emotions a little bit better. So the whole part of grieving, half of it is just understanding that you're grieving, right? So if you don't know what's going on, you beat yourself up for feeling bad. With that bargaining process, with the failures, with the frustration, many times people have sadness and depression. I think everybody goes through a time where they're done. They don't want anymore. It's too hard. It's too much of a burden, and life just seems too hard. And that certainly is a good excuse to be sad and to be down. And there's going to be those days, right? So when you have those days, give yourself some care, rest, take a nap, take a bubble bath, get a massage, do something kind for yourself. But the thing with this depression stage or sadness is you don't want to get stuck there. And that's something that if you are stuck in sadness and depression, you probably need to take it one more step and go see a therapist or a counselor, because A, you really have a legitimate reason for sadness and depression, but B, you really want to work through those emotions so you can get beyond if that's the only thing you see, then you're stuck. Once we kind of work through all that, we get to the last stage called acceptance, and acceptance is where you begin to feel better. And sometimes in bargaining, you feel better too when you have those successes and those wins, but in that bargaining stage, you're just up and down so much. So acceptance, though, is when you come to terms with what your life is and with how it works, and you're not hiding anything. You fully see what's required, and you find that place in yourself that you can pull from to do what you need to do. So really this grief and emotions thing, there's so many emotions, exploring which emotions you're having, where you're stuck, and what's behind some of it is super important for really getting to that acceptance space. Because when you're stuck in depression or you're stuck in bargaining, it's really hard. You don't feel better, right? That's not a better place, and you want to get to better. So that's the first two. Number three is motivation. So what motivates you? Like, what is it about you that gets you to do something you want to do? And so that's not always that obvious, right? So we have to understand and look internally and do some tests and some quizzes and different things to understand, what are your drivers? What lights your fire? What are your passions? You will do what you believe, and you will act based on how you feel. And so understanding what you believe and your feelings, those two things are very key to your motivation. And so if you're not feeling great and you feel bad physically and or emotionally, it's really going to be hard to be motivated, right? Those are diametrically opposed. So there's a good amount of time understanding your motivation and putting strategies in place that work for you. So I am very externally motivated. So that's just something about the way God made me. And so I have to do things to keep myself accountable. I'm a list maker. I have things on my calendar. I have a lot of external things that help keep me on focus. And that just works for me. May not work for everybody. Some people are the opposite of motivated if a doctor tells them what to do. They become resentful. So if you're not motivated by a healthcare provider giving you guidelines on how to live your life, that may be why we're resistant, right? So there's some things in there that we can work through, talk about, and come to know to help you get motivated. The one motivator that we don't want to use is fear. So fear is usually where we start. We're scared to death. We don't want to die. There are certainly fearful times with low blood sugars, high blood sugars, and all the complications and the scary stuff that it has. But to live your life in a state of fear is not feeling better, right? So we need to find things that draw us forward because we like them versus things we run away from because we don't. So that's that whole motivation thing. And so a good example is maybe checking your blood sugar. If you're fearful of checking your blood sugar, you're probably not going to do it very much. But if we can find motivation that you're curious about that number, or there's reason for you to dig in and find a little bit more, you might be more apt to check that blood sugar. It's all in the motivation. 4 is a big one for me, and it's ownership. So you have to figure out how to live this disease in your life on your terms. And there are a lot of people around you who are going to tell you what to do, how to do, and they are all wonderful and good. Your doctors, your nurses, your diabetes educators. But at the end of the day, you are living your life and you have to do the things that you're comfortable with. You have to find a way that works for you. When you live in victim mode, you don't feel good. That is not better at all. Living as a victim where you feel like you have no voice and no choice, it's hard. It's a heavy, heavy load to bear. So when you get ownership, when you decide what you're willing to do and not willing to do, and what works for you and what doesn't, the load gets lighter, right? Because you're doing what you're comfortable with. You understand all the choices that you have and you intentionally make some. And it is about making an intentional choice, right? It's about thinking about what you want to do and doing it on purpose. And that, again, is taking back that ownership, getting control so you're on your 2 feet. The last thing that we go over is communication. So how do I want to say this? How do I want to communicate this? Communication is very important because there's a lot of things going on inside us. So we are our own experts, right? We know how we feel. We know what's going on. We have this intuition that guides us. How do you share that with everybody else? How do you tell people what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with? How do you tell them how to help you, right? So how to care for me, what I need, what I don't need. How do you tell somebody they're smothering you? How do you tell someone you need more help? How do you tell someone in a work situation or someone that you just meet? There's so many things about communication, and communication can be a vast, vast array of information. Communication can be reading. It can be reading labels. How are you communicating with yourself so you're informed to make good choices about your food? Communication is one we could talk about forever and ever, but nobody talks about it really. You kind of get communicated at, but we want to learn how to communicate with others so you have your voice and you're being heard and you feel like you're in charge and in control. And that word is empowerment. And empowerment makes you feel better. And that's where the journey should lead you, to where you're empowered, you're making choices, you're living with all the failures that diabetes is. But as I always say, it's not about perfection, it's persistence. And persistence can feel better too. Just when you're doing it every day, it's common, right? So those are the things. I'm not going to keep going on. I think I could talk about this all day because I'm so passionate about it. But those are my 5 strategies. If that resonates with you, if you're curious about how we might explore those strategies, I'd love to talk with you more. You can leave me a message here, direct message me, comment on my Facebook and or on my website. which I'm going to have a new website. That's 2 little zingers to teasers, I guess, to add. One, new website coming soon, so I'll let you all know when that happens. My marketing team is doing a wonderful job putting together a brand new site, so I'm super excited about that. And then book launch is getting closer. I'm going to be at a wellness expo this weekend in Coppell. So if you're in the DFW area, it's Saturday morning in Coppell, Old Town Coppell will be there. And we're going to be doing some previews of my book and my coloring book, so your kids can come out and color a fun page, upload it on Facebook to win to be entered in a drawing for a chance to win my book. So more information on the book coming out soon. We'll have some dates and things. Pretty excited about that. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you for sharing part of your day with me. And again, if you have questions or anything you'd like to talk about, I would love to hear your comments. Leave me a note, send me an email. But today, have a great day. Go do something wonderful for yourself and feel better. Bye.